These last like 2 months have been absolutely insane for video game fans. To start, we had some crazy successes and some crazy massive releases that went really well. Black Myth Wukong shattered records in sales everywhere. Warhammer Space Marine 2 did pretty much the same thing. Astrobot did the same thing, and it is getting praised for a possible Game of the Year winner. Tons of successes, and there were also a ton of failures in these last 2 months also. Concord being the most notable one. I don't even have to talk about that. That whole thing is crazy. We're going to talk about it later. Dustborn or Duskborn, whatever, that was an absolute disaster as well. And Star Wars Outlaws, once again, just another flop for how big the budget was for that game. With the recent events in the gaming community, gamers are sending a message to the corporations out there, and gamers are really putting their foot down, okay? And we're gonna go ahead and talk about it real quick though. This video is inspired by a video from another creator called MugThief. He made a great video that is inspiring this video, so definitely go check that out. It will be linked in the description. It's a great video essay. Check him out as a creator. He's awesome. I want to go ahead and start off by saying that the video game industry is in a really, really weird spot. I feel like consumers have kind of been gaslit over the last couple years, and we're basically being blamed for a lot of games failures by other companies. They're all the time, whenever there's like a new game that flops, a developer will go crash out on Twitter or something and say that the consumers are stupid. You have statements from I think it was like Ubisoft's or EA CEO or whatever, saying that gamers want digital video games over physical, and that physical media should be gone. Dude, they have been trying to kind of brainwash the consumers into accepting crap, essentially just accepting terrible products like that. That's just what it feels like. I've been a gamer my whole life, and I feel like in the 2020s that's what it's felt like. And I'm not saying there hasn't been any good releases in the last couple of years. There's been some absolutely, some of the best video games that have ever been made have been made during this time period. There's a ton of good ones out there, but there is a weird little industry standard, and I feel like you see a lot of companies, for example Ubisoft, they just don't make good games anymore. They straight up just don't. And Ubisoft has always been a questionable company in the industry, in my opinion. They've always had some shady stuff going on for as long as I can remember, but there was a point in time where they made decent games, you know what I mean? So it's just really interesting. There are good games that have come out during this era, though. I want to preface that as well. Now, I really, really want to talk about Concord. I know you're probably so sick of hearing about it. We know, obviously, it was a massive failure, but I think the reason it was a massive failure was kind of interesting. Now, this is coming from somebody who played the beta, and I'm not a Concord defender or anything by any means. That game is straight up garbage, okay? But I did play the beta, and it wasn't like a completely broken game. It wasn't like a game that was unfinished and unpolished, in my opinion. At least it had some decent gameplay mechanics. It looked okay visually. It was just kind of mediocre and meh to play, but it wasn't all bad. It was just too generic. And I think I obviously expected it to fail. Okay, I obviously expected it to fail, but I don't think I expected it to fail to this magnitude. They literally shut down the game 2 weeks after it came out, and on launch it had a couple hundred players. That is another level. I didn't think it would perform that great, but for a game that felt somewhat polished and looked actually decent graphics wise, and didn't have any massive bugs or anything, that is insane to me. And I think that is the consumer's tipping point right there. The game was completely playable. That's why I think it's so insane that it literally had to get shut down after 2 weeks, because I don't think that has ever happened in video game history, even with some of the worst online live service games. Some of you guys may remember back in the PS3 days, there was a game called Brink. I think it's a good comparison to Concord. And I remember Brink had some sort of player base. I played that when it came out, and there was people who were playing it, and it just kind of fizzled out over time. That was a long time ago at this point. But there are a ton of other examples of games, The Finals, a free-to-play FPS game, or X Defiant, another free-to-play FPS game. They kind of, they are fizzling out, and they're pretty much completely gone at this point. Nobody touches those games anymore, really. But they had some sort of player base, at least for a little bit, and they were still like those generic titles. Now, that can probably be attributed to them being free to play, but I still think it's wild to me, like, that Concord flopped after a while. And then that, what that tells me is that consumers, consumers and gamers everywhere are collectively fed up with live service, with all this garbage, and they're not going to take that nonsense anymore. Because then you turn around and you look at games that came out around the same time, like Warhammer Space Marine 2. Dude, it had an online mode and everything, and it had a full-fledged campaign. That game had like 100,000 players in early access on Steam alone, and to play the early access, you had to spend $100 minimum. I bought it, dude. Like, it was popping. It was so good. People were dropping easily $100 on a great product because it looked awesome and it just plays awesome. Black Myth Wukong shattered records, dude. Like 2 million. That game dropped on a Monday night here in the United States, and it still broke records. Like, that's insane. A Monday night, a game release, a single player game, and it shattered records. That's insane to me. Yeah. Now I want to go ahead and talk about Astrobot, because Astrobot is super interesting, and I'm going to compare and contrast this to Concord. Obviously, they're two way different games, but Concord actually got canned the day Astrobot came out. And I'm going to say this right now, I don't think Sony expected Astrobot to be, such a smash hit that it is. All right, I don't think they expected that at all. And I think they thought Concord was going to make them a decent amount of money if they pushed it out and shoved it in a lot of people's faces. Because, dude, Concord was seriously everywhere in marketing, I feel like, for the past couple weeks. And it was just everywhere in everyone's face. And no one cared still. No one cared. Literally no one cared. And Astrobot was like a little bit more of a low-key game. It's still a AAA game, obviously. But the team that worked on Astrobot is like 65 people. Sony wasn't pushing it as hard as they were with like Concord. And if I'm Sony and I'm sitting here and I watch Concord flop, and then the same day I watch Astrobot get all of these, these Game of the Year nominees and all of this critical acclaim and, 94 on Metacritic, like, come on, man. Come on. It cannot be more night and day than that. It seriously cannot be. By this point, they have to know what consumers want. With the release and the flop of Concord, the higher executives in any game company out there should know what video game players want, man. We are so sick of these corporate manufactured online games, dude. We're so over it. We're just over these corporate manufactured games, just in general. Skull and Bones, complete garbage. Star Wars Outlaws, complete garbage. And then you look at like all the games that came out recently with actually some passion and some care behind them. Warhammer Space Marine, Black Myth Wukong, Astrobot. It's so night and day that even those out of touch idiots higher up in gaming, in the corporations, they should be able to know what consumers want now, if it wasn't clear enough before. And this is kind of a proud moment for me as a gamer to see kind of like the video game community unite and just like, nah, we're not going to touch Concord. That's insane, because like I said, dude, this game was in everyone's face against their will. Even people who don't know a lot about video games and video game industries, and they just have a PS5, like, they didn't even touch Concord, and there was tons of advertisement for it. That says something, man. That really does. Now, real quick, I'm going to make a comparison that's going to make no sense to you guys, all right? Astrobot is on the same level as Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring. And some of you guys are like, wait, hold on. What I'm saying here is Astrobot, with terms of, giving consumers what they want and having creativity and passion behind a project and actually being a revolutionizing next-gen game, I think it's on the same scale. Obviously, they're completely two different games. And I make this comparison because some of you guys are like, that came out of nowhere. I make this comparison because in 2022, Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok came out, massive games. You had developers come out and say, don't expect our games to be this quality. Don't. They said that about Elden Ring. I don't remember the exact quote, but I know that there was a developer out there. There was some drama behind that. I know. Okay. Then in 2023, obviously, Baldur's Gate 3, you had developers come out and say, do not expect our game to be this quality. Okay. And then you have Astrobot, which in with terms of like giving consumers a creative and fun project with a lot of care behind it, I think is on the same level as Baldur's Gate 3, right? Like I do think that. And it's a completely different style of game. I know. That's not the point I'm making here. What are the developers going to say about this? You know, like what are the developers over at Ubisoft, or like, you know, what are they going to say about Astrobot? Like, what? You can't make a game like Astrobot? You can't make a game like this? You know what I mean? Like, you can't get butthurt over this, because any AAA, you know, studio, if they gave their developers some time and some care, you know, some little bit of care and a little bit of time to put passion into their project, and they just let them cook, you know, they could have made this. Any AAA studio could have made this. And that, like I said, this was a team of 65 people. You're telling me you can't recreate this? Come on now. And, you know, with all the recent events, you know, all these big successes and all these big failures, the companies that are responsible for a lot of this cash grab nonsense going on are going to be, you know, really put to the test with their stability as a company. All right. Ubisoft, man, I'm gonna pick on Ubisoft. They cannot continue down this path of releasing this cash grab nonsense any longer. They seriously cannot, man. In 2024, they have lost so much money. All right, Skull and Bones, complete flop, costed them a ton to make, most likely. You know, it was a quadruple A game, so I guess it cost a bunch of money to make in that case. Star Wars Outlaws, you're dealing with the Star Wars IP, so that should be pretty telling in and of itself of how much that game costs to make. They cannot afford to keep doing this. They cannot. And, you know, Ubisoft, that all those executives got rocks rolling around in their head at this point. I'm sorry, man. They genuinely do. And I would not be surprised if they drove themselves into the ground with terrible decision after terrible decision. You know, as big as they are and how, you know, it doesn't matter. It will eventually happen. I'm telling you right now, if they don't make change with their products, it's going to happen. It just will. And they're already developing a terrible reputation in their industry, you know, and when they eventually go under, if they continue down this path, I guarantee you're going to see them turn around and start gaslighting consumers. You know, this is something that they've done before. They'll turn around and be like, yeah, well, nobody even likes video games anymore, so that's why we went under. You know, like, nobody even buys video games. That's crazy. Like, they're going to say something like that. And that goes for any AAA studio that's involved, as EA, whatever. You know, I don't care how much money they make, they will eventually suffer. And you can see that with layoffs in the industry. And it's very, very apparent, man. It is so painfully obvious. Another reason we have seen these companies slowly decline over, you know, time, like Ubisoft, for example, because there is a point in time, like I said before, they made some decent games. The reason we've seen this, you know, decline over time in their quality and their sales and everything is because they are stuck in a rat race trying to make the biggest spectacle, you know, and that goes for a ton of AAA companies. You know, a lot of companies that they want to make the next big cash cow online game where everyone's buying skins like Fortnite, you know, or they're trying to make the next biggest and best open world that's revolutionizing. And what these developers and these companies fail to realize is you can't, once something makes history, you can't do it again. It's not going to be special, man. You know, Ubisoft has tried to attempt this so many times, and Elden Ring being a massive success doesn't help it at all. You know, that's why you see so many companies out here trying to push massive open world games, online shooters. They're trying to replicate the success of some of the biggest hits in recent years. You know what I mean? And that's just how business is at the end of the day. I get it. You have to follow trends and you have to keep up with the trending market. But I think video games is an exception of that. I'm sorry, I think it is. With the right marketing and the right tools, you can put out a creative project doesn't feel copy and paste to something else. Like, because at the end of the day, most gamers realize this: video games are art. You know, What makes video games special is the ones that differ from each other. In my opinion, that's what I think. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I just think there's too much corporate nonsense going on and too many businesses trying to copy trends. And a lot of AAA studios out there just need to hold their horses and work on their own thing. They need to be creative. It could be a 3D platformer that's simple and fun like Astrobot. It could be a linear action RPG game like Black Myth Wukong. It doesn't have to be massive open world action game. You could have, I don't know, instead of an online FPS game, give us a narrative driven FPS game. You know, something like that. A lot of studios out there just need to be more creative. There's no creativity, and I don't know if there ever will be, but that's the solution here. That is clearly the solution. You know, in the 2020s, the most creative games are the most successful. Baldur's Gate 3, smash hit, super creative. Elden Ring, that's Miyazaki's work. It's super creative. I know it gets a ton of buzz, and a lot of people think it's overrated. Elden Ring is super creative. Astrobot, super creative. The missing ingredient here for these developers is creativity. And I don't think that can be any more apparent after the events that have happened in the past 2 months with all the crazy releases and all the crazy failures. But yeah, anyways, man, thanks for watching this Yap session if you watched all along. And like I said before, this video is inspired by a creator named MugThief. Great creator. Go check him out. He will be linked in the description once again. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace. Make sure to drop a like and a subscribe if you did enjoy it. Yeah.